Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go my review of WCW Starrcade 1999. Starting off the evening, we'll go to our first match of the night. It is Disco Inferno teaming up with Lash LaRue versus Johnny the Bull and Vito. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Inferno and LaRue keeping the pace of the match. But Inferno hits the finish on LaRue, and your winners of the match are Johnny the Bull and Vito. Hats off to Johnny the Bull and Vito for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. It is Evan Courageous versus Medusa. I thought it was an okay matchup. Medusa quickly attacks Courageous. Match turns into a back and forth matchup, but Medusa hits a suplex on Courageous, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time new WCW Cruiserweight Champion, is Medusa. Hats off to Medusa for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW Hardcore Championship. It is Norman Smiley versus Ming. I thought this was an awful matchup. Ming was keeping the pace of the match. Finlay then attacks Ming. Brian Knobbs attacks Ming as well. Finlay then hits Ming with a pipe. And your winner of the match, due to the help from Fit Finlay, is Norman Smiley. Hats off to Norman Smiley for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Dean Malenko teaming up with Perry Saturn, Shane Douglas, and Asia versus Jim Duggan, Kevin Sullivan, Mike Rotunda, and Rick Steiner. Again, I thought this was an awful match. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with the Varsity Club attacking Jim Duggan. And your winners of the match are Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, Shane Douglas, and Asia. Hats off to the Revolution for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Vampiro versus Dr. Death Steve Williams. I thought this was an okay matchup. Vampiro quickly attacks Dr. Death Steve Williams, and Vampiro ultimately wins this match by disqualification. Hats off to Vampiro for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night, pretty much an impromptu match, if you will. It is Oklahoma versus Vampiro. I thought this was a horrible match. Vampiro quickly attacks Oklahoma, and your winner of the match is Vampiro. Hats off to Vampiro for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Gerald, Patrick, and Kurt Hennig versus Harlem Heat and Midnight. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Gerald, Patrick, and Hennig keeping the pace of the match. Hennig then hits Booker T with brass knuckles. Referee doesn't see it. Pins for the 3. And your winners of the match are Gerald, Patrick, and Kurt Hennig. Hats off to Gerald, Patrick, and Kurt Hennig for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a bunkhouse buck match. It is Dustin Rhodes versus Jeff Jarrett. I thought it was a good match. Jarrett quickly attacks Dustin Rhodes. Match turns into a back and forth matchup, but Jarrett hits Dustin with the guitar, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Jeff Jarrett. Hats off to Jeff Jarrett for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a crowbar on a pole match. It is Diamond Dallas Page versus David Flair. I thought this was an awful matchup as well. Back and forth matchup between DDP and David Flair, with DDP hitting Flair with the crowbar, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is DDP. Hats off to DDP for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Lex Luger versus Sting. I thought this was a good match. Luger quickly attacks Sting. Luger was keeping the pace of the match, but Miss Elizabeth hits Sting with a bat. Referee ends up seeing this, and your winner of the match by disqualification is Sting. Hats off to Sting for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a powerbomb matchup. It is Kevin Nash versus Sid Vicious. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between Nash and Vicious. Sid then hits a powerbomb on Nash, but the referee didn't see it. Nash then tells the referee that he hit a powerbomb on Sid Vicious, and your winner of the match is Kevin Nash. Hats off to Kevin Nash for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a ladder match for the WCW United States Championship. It is Jeff Jarrett versus Chris Benoit. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Jarrett and Benoit. Benoit then hits a diving headbutt off the ladder on Jarrett. Pins for the 3. And your winner of the match is Chris Benoit. Hats off to Benoit for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of Starrcade 1999. It is a no disqualification match for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. It is Goldberg versus Bret Hart. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Goldberg and Bret Hart, with Goldberg keeping the pace of the match. Piper makes his way out to the ring. Hart then puts Goldberg in a sharpshooter. And then Hart calls Piper for for some help. But your winner of the match by submission is Bret Hart. Hats off to Bret Hart for getting the win in this matchup. A couple of things I'm going to say about Starrcade 1999, man, before I get out of here. Number one, I thought it was an awful event. And it's crazy to say that because Starrcade, to me, was the WrestleMania for WCW. In my honest opinion, I think Starrcade, in the beginning, I'm talking about the early NWA days when, Starrcade was introduced. With Starrcade 1983, I believe the main event was Harley Race defending the NWA World Heavyweight Championship against Ric Flair in a steel cage match with special guest referee Gene Kiniski. To me, ever since I saw that matchup, to me, Starrcade was always synonymous with NWA, WCW. And to me, what Crockett was doing and what, Ted Turner was doing with WCW and NWA, Starrcade was always one of the, to me, was always the predominant event for WCW. They always put the best versus the best on that card. We did not get that for Starrcade 1999, man. The main event was Bret Hart versus Goldberg. It was a infamous match because it was one of those matches where, according to Bret Hart, was one of those matches that ended his career. And he's still talking about it till this day about what Goldberg did to him in that matchup and how it pretty much ended his career. As far as in-ring career is concerned. But it's just crazy, man, because, Starrcade, like I said, from Starrcade 83 until 2001, to me, Starrcade was the synonymous event with WCW. And, as years went on from 1999 up to 2001, Starrcade was one of the worst pay-per-views that WCW put together, which is absolutely insane, man, because some of the matches that you've seen in the early days of Starrcade, I would say from Starrcade 83 all the way up to, 98 were some of the best Starrcades I've ever seen. But after 98, man, it was just downhill from there, not only for Starrcade, but for WCW as well. So, it's just a shame, man. There was a couple matches on this card that I honestly could have done without. Inferno teaming up with LaRue versus Johnny the Bull and Vito, awful matchup. Evan Courageous versus Medusa as well, awful matchup. And it was for the Cruiserweight division championship, which is crazy because, in the beginning years of, when Bischoff was running WCW, the Cruiserweight division was one of the best things WCW had. And I've stated this multiple times in the past as well. I mean, the amount of talent that walked through that door for WCW as a Cruiserweight, man, are absolute legends. Guys like Psychosis, Rey Mysterio Jr., Billy Kidman, Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Juventud Guerrera. I mean, the names are endless for the Cruiserweight division that, WCW had in the beginning. Ultimo Dragon, and then we get Evan Courageous versus Medusa for the Cruiserweight Championship, man. It just goes to show you, how bad, things were getting for WCW, and it was only getting worse, and we all knew what happened in the end when Vince McMahon bought the company, and, a lot of that talent that was on WCW was, that was it. Only a handful of people got selected to go over to WWE once Vince bought the company. And, you can start to tell, during these later years in pay-per-view, later years, 99 up to 2001, the pay-per-views were just getting awful, profusely awful. So, but with that being said, just like I do with every single one of these pay-per-views, you guys know by now, I always give these pay-per-views a rating from 1 out of 10. 1 being the absolute worst, 10 being the absolute best. I'm going to have to give Starrcade 1999 a solid rating of a 3 at best. But this is my review of WCW Starrcade 1999. I hope you guys are out there staying safe, be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.